Welcome to the Power Proficiency and Interpersonal Communication broadcast. This is part of our Power Proficiency series for world languages and our new world language standards. I want to start with the agenda and some introductions today. This is our NCDPI World Languages team. My name is Anne-Marie Gunter. I am your World Languages consultant here at the Department of Public Instruction, and I'm happy to see you here. Notice you can always contact me via email or phone, as well as my supervisor, Dr. Stacy Daniel. She is over all of languages at the department, so English Language Arts or ELA, multilingual learners in Title III or ML Title III, and of course, world languages. Also, don't forget, we have brand new social media that just opened up in the fall. And so you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We do have an NCDPI World Languages team page, and I'm going to put that link in the chat. That's where this information and more is posted about world languages at DPI. Our agenda is pretty straightforward today. We're obviously, like I said, going to start with introductions. We're going to talk about the interpersonal communication resources that are available online. We're particularly going to look at the World Languages Resources Hub and the Proficiency Outcomes area there, along with the LIS or Literacy Instruction Standards area and the Unpacking area. After that, we'll wrap up and have an evaluation of this broadcast. Throughout our webinar today, we'll have several activities that we're going to be working on. First, of course, there are poll questions here in WebEx that you'll get to answer and respond to. Then we'll also have waterfall in the chat, and those are open-ended questions that allow you to respond in the chat but not send your response until you hear me say, let's watch the waterfall. And then we can all watch the waterfall in the chat and everyone's responses as they go through. Finally, another activity we have is called Your Turn. And this is an opportunity to connect what we're learning today and learning about to your language classes that you teach or supervise. So that's our plan for today. Let's start with some introductions. Like I said, we have a poll question. Our poll question today is, where are you joining us from for today's broadcast? I'm going to go ahead and open up that poll question so that you can respond. And that should come up on your dashboard. You should be able to click the answer that's right for you. So where are you joining us from today for today's broadcast? Is it your classroom, your office, a shared space at school, home? Maybe you're on the road with a mobile device, or maybe it's someplace else. Where are you at today? All right. See a lot of people putting their votes in. Looks like most people are either home or in their classroom. That's great. Obviously, you can join us from anywhere you have an internet connection. We're always happy to see you. All right. Well, as part of our introductions, though, we also want to talk about our focus today. So for our waterfall in the chat, what I want you to answer there in the chat is which language course that you currently teach or supervise are you going to focus on for standard number 2, which is interpersonal communication. Now remember, with waterfall in the chat, start to type your answer in the chat. Just type it out the way you want. But do not hit send until you hear me say to do so. So I'm going to pause for a moment. Go ahead and type your answer in the chat. Which language course that you currently teach or supervise are you going to focus on for standard number 2, interpersonal communication today? If you want, you can also start your response with your first name. All right, let's watch the waterfall. Go ahead and hit send. Seeing a lot of Spanish and French, Japanese we've got here today. All right. Various levels of those languages. All right, I see some of you are entering that, what you're teaching in that language. That's great to see as well. All right, and some of you are listing multiple classes. You're welcome to focus on multiple classes. You just may want to pick one, but it's up to you, really, what you want to do. All right, looks great. Well, thank you so much. It's good to see everybody here. And wanting to explore our new standards. You know, we are implementing our North Carolina Standard Course of Study for World Languages for the first time this school year. So we've had a little bit of practice of it now since we've gotten to this portion of the school year, the second semester, or just February in the year. And we're going to talk a little bit about, like I said, the resources that are available and what you could use and maybe what you want to explore further as well. I also see we've got German and some other languages coming out. Great. Good to see everybody. All right, so let's talk about our World Languages Resources Hub. This is the space that we have in addition to the NCDPI website World Languages section that everybody can access. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what's there. I know some of you are probably familiar with it. But our World Languages Resources Hub has 4 categories. You see them there at the bottom of the screen. They are World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit resources, also teacher and classroom resources, administrator and program resources, and professional learning information. So that's always up there. It's always updated. If you ever find a broken link or anything like that, be sure and tell me so that I can get it fixed. A couple things you'll notice, obviously, we have a shortened URL. And I just put that in the chat so you can go directly to the hub and take a look at it as you would like. It does display a little bit differently depending on what browser you're using or type of device, but it's all there for you to explore. We also have a QR code that takes you to it very quickly. Once you're there in the hub, you'll notice that in the upper left-hand corner, there's usually a spot that says WL Resources and then Home. So if you're ever in the hub and you get lost in some of the spaces on there, you can always look in that upper left-hand corner, click Home, and go back to the main page, back to your 4 categories like you see here. Also, if you use Canvas, because our hub really is just a Canvas course or Canvas space, but set up as a website that everybody can access, you can actually join this course and click that button, which usually displays in the upper right-hand corner of your browser, although it will depend, again, which browser or device you're using. When you click join that course, it will allow the World Languages Resources Hub to appear on your dashboard for Canvas if you are also using other things in Canvas. So that's an option for you if that would make it easier to get to. Well, like I said, the World Languages Resources Hub has 4 categories because there's a lot of information there. We're going to focus today on that first one, the World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit resources. Because not only do we have new standards that we're implementing, but we have a lot of tools and materials and resources that go with them to help you as a teacher or supervisor implement those standards and think more deeply about them in the professional learning that you're doing with them. So we're going to explore that first column, the World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit resources. And you can see within that category, there are 4 different areas. They're on the right-hand side of the screen. There's the Unpacking Documents area, the Proficiency Outcomes area, the Literacy Instruction Standards or LIS area, and the National Standards area with lots of information. We're going to focus on the Proficiency Outcomes area. You know that we have proficiency-based state standards. We have had since our previous standards, which were approved in 2010, our current ones are approved in 2024. North Carolina was the first state in the country to have K-12 state standards that were proficiency-based, meaning that we looked at that actual proficiency chart that you see represented there with the inverted pyramid, and we laid out in our state standards minimum proficiency expectations or student outcomes for every single course and program that we had in our state standards. Even though we were the first, many states have since followed suit. So when we just updated our standards a few years ago, we were able to draw on a lot more information and research and so forth than we were able to the first time we did that and created proficiency-based standards. But regardless, we always want to have information about our proficiency outcomes, as well as tools from around the country that can help us understand what we mean by proficiency-based instruction. So in this proficiency outcomes area, one of the things we're going to focus on today is that proficiency outcomes document. This is the component of our toolkit that goes with our North Carolina Standard Course of Study for World Languages and tells us, again, where we want students to be by the end of a particular course or program. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the proficiency outcomes area in World Languages Resources Hub in the chat so that you have that directly. Once you get these slides, because I will post them afterwards, you can also just use the link there on the slide that will get to you. And I often put it in the notes too, especially for those of you who are using these slides and repurposing them for local learning. All right, so let's go on and take a look at not only our proficiency outcomes document, but you'll notice down at the bottom, we have some additional resources. Some of the ones that are grayed out are simply grayed out because they're still there, but they're not the focus of this particular broadcast. We have looked at those in other broadcasts in this series. But we're also going to take a look at the necessitable, actful, can-do statements today. I want to point out to you that it now says the necessitable, actful, can-do statements of 2026. That is a brand new version of the can-do statements. The previous one was 2017. The 2026 set was just made public yesterday afternoon. So I get to change up our slides so that you would be the first group to learn about and to see the new necessitable, actful, can-do statements that have just been released. Let's focus first, though, on our proficiency outcomes document that goes with our standards. You see here just a screenshot of that first page. Notice that the proficiency summaries are on page 1, and this is a 3-bullet summary of every proficiency level that's part of a student outcome in our new standards. So we go from novice low through advanced high. Obviously, you can see on the inverted pyramid from ACTFL that there are levels beyond that. There's superior and there's distinguished, but those are not outcomes for our particular courses or programs, because many times to reach those levels of proficiency, you have to go on as an adult once you graduate from your K-12 experience to continue further language study to reach that level of proficiency. But we do have minimum proficiency outcome charts for all of our programs, including classical. You see it's on pages 2 and 3 of this document. Classical languages are like Latin and Ancient Greek. We have outcome charts for dual and heritage programs. That includes dual language immersion or DLI on page 4. And heritage levels 1 and 2 that bridge into higher level modern language courses on pages 5 through 7. And then finally, we have modern languages, or languages that are being taught as a separate subject and are still used somewhere in the world today as someone's first language. And those are on pages 8 through 12. I would encourage you to look at that proficiency outcomes document when you get a chance, and to look at also, the things that are most relevant to the courses that you said you're interested in. I'm going to put a direct link to the proficiency outcomes document in the chat. You see that there's a shortened URL and a QR code for that document as well on the screen. I will jump over real quick and just show you this before we go on to some of the other things that we're going to be talking about. Give me just a moment. I'm moving around with the technology back here behind the scenes. So when you pull up the proficiency outcomes document, there we go, like you see here, you'll see, like I said, there are multiple pages. We're going to look at, in a minute, page 1, the proficiency summaries. But as I said, you can scroll down through here and see, based on the course there on the left, as well as the standard across the top of the charts, where students should be by the time they complete a particular course or program. And this starts with classical. As I said, you see the K-8 and then the high school credit courses. Then with dual heritage language programs with DLI and heritage languages. Notice our heritage languages are broken into category 1 and 2 languages and category 3 and 4 languages, as well as ASL, a visual language, although ASL is also technically a category 3 language. But ASL has some unique needs as far as how they term their particular skill areas, like our communication modes or standards, that we wanted to make sure were clear. And then, of course, we have our modern language programs. And we start out again with K-8 programs, category 1 and 2, and then category 3 and 4 languages, and then go on to our high school credit courses. Many of you said this is probably the chart you're looking at. For category 1 and 2 languages, I saw French, German, and Spanish in the introductions, or I did also see Japanese and some other languages, and they are here on the next page. And then finally, like I said, ASL sometimes gets its own chart. All right. So that's the proficiency outcomes document. But as we take a look at it, one of the things I want you to think about as we're talking about interpersonal communication is not only those proficiency summaries, but to really think about what our standard says, which is interact and negotiate meaning in signed, spoken, or written conversation. Now, this is interpersonal communication. So this is one-to-one or a small group of people talking. Obviously, signed language if they're a student using ASL, spoken, if it's a spoken language. And don't forget written conversations, think like text messages or quick notes that are jotted off. Those are the kinds of interpersonal communication or interpersonal communication mode that we're thinking about when we say interact and negotiate meaning in signed, spoken, or written conversations. Now, on these proficiency summaries, a couple of things. You'll notice that the proficiency scale really has 5 levels, right? Novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished. However, those proficiency levels, of at least the first 3, are broken into sub-levels of low, mid, and high. So you get novice low, novice mid, novice high, intermediate low, mid, and high, and advanced low, mid, and high. One thing to keep in mind is when we think about proficiency-based standards or proficiency-based teaching, we're talking about helping students build skills, practice, and perform in the classroom so that they have skills in all their language abilities to do that on their own. So we're looking at performance in the classroom as they practice that, but then they're building proficiency, which is what they walk out of our classrooms or learning environments with and can do on their own independently of any particular learning environment or support. So it's important to keep in mind that difference between performance and proficiency when we look at these summaries. But when we think about interpersonal communication, what I want you to focus on is the second bullet in each summary. Because each of our standards, and we have 3 standards, obviously, each of our standards has its own summary, if you will. And so interpersonal communication, standard number 2, is the second bullet in each summary. So take a look and consider particularly the verbs or the way they're describing learner interaction and how that changes as you go from novice low to novice mid to novice high, and then further on up to different proficiency levels. As you start to take a look, you'll probably see that it says things like in the novice level, students are using language, simple questions, simple sentences, etc. And then when you get to intermediate, when you talk about intermediate proficiency, is where students can create. So they're asking things like asking follow-up questions, a variety of questions, and that kind of thing. And then finally, the advanced levels, the highest levels, this is where you see verbs like interacting or interacting in extended discussions or discussing and supporting. So again, take a look at that bullet, that second bullet, and how learner interaction is presented. All right. As we think about standard number 2, there are always some questions that come up about that and how it works and so forth. And one of the things is that phrase, negotiate meaning. And so when we think about interpersonal communication and what that actually means, I have pulled for us today the definition of that is in our World Languages Glossary with the new standards. So you see it coming up. Basically, negotiate meaning it's a feature of two-way or multi-way communication, like interpersonal communication is, where whoever's talking or signing or writing or texting to each other, they can interact and ask for or provide clarification, repetition, or restatement of a message in order to improve comprehension. So always important in communication to make sure you're understood and you're being understood, and you're understanding what's happening. And so negotiating means if you don't understand or you aren't being understood, you can ask for clarification. You can ask someone to repeat. You could ask someone to say it a different way, whatever it is. That's what we mean by negotiate meaning. When we look at that within our standards, we want to break that down and look at them in the objectives for each strand. So obviously one of our strands is interdisciplinary literacy connections, or the ILC strand. And so when we think about the ILC strand and standard number 2, we only have 3 objectives per proficiency level for that. So notice that structure that is on the screen. So the XX is a particular proficiency level. The ILC refers to the strand. The 2 refers to standard number 2. That's what our focus is. And then the 1, 2, or 3, or 1 through 3 refers to which objective number it is. So for the ILC strand, interdisciplinary and literacy connections, our objectives are put together with learner interaction, and then communication task, and then the type of language that students can produce at that proficiency level. So let's take a closer look. Here is the novice mid ILC strand for interpersonal communications, data number 2. The first objective says express basic needs using practiced or memorized words and phrases, as well as simple sentences and questions. So learner interaction is expressing, and then the communication task is basic needs, and the type of language is practice or memorize words and phrases, plus some simple sentences and questions. All right, so that's the first objective in this set. And then you see coming up on the screen the second objective and the third objective. So this is all for novice mid, the ILC strand, standard number 2, and then objectives 1, 2, and 3. This is how our new standards have been simplified. They're much more concise than they were, but this is what we want to think about when we think about negotiating meaning in standard number 2. Also, we have a question about communities. And so one of the things that we have in our state standards, so that we're aligned to the national standards, is this reference to communities, and particularly to the intercultural and communities connections strand. And again, I reference you to the glossary, because in the glossary, it defines communities as one of the 5 goals of our World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages, or one of the 5 C's for the national standards. And it talks about how learners need to be able to communicate and interact with cultural competence, but to be able to do that at home and around the world. And so we want to emphasize our learners' use of the target language, whatever language they're studying, to collaborate in person and virtually. And in our old standards, there was some confusion about this, about saying, well, then would you have to find, for example, conversation partners in another country? Well, you could. That's one option. But also, we wanted to make sure we were clear about how that would work. And so once again, you see the structure. So that it starts with the proficiency level for the objective, the ICC strand, standard number 2. And here we have just 2 objectives. And again, they start with communication task, the intercultural context, and then the interaction participants, who students can interact with and to use that language at home and around the world. And so for that first objective, in this case, the novice high set of ICC objectives for standard number 2, notice it talks about, again, communication task, recognizing basic social conventions, using culturally appropriate greetings and questions, that's the intercultural context. But the interaction participants, who you can be with, is peers from the target cultures and or communities of learners. And you see the same thing in the structure of the second objective for this set. And this is how it works throughout all proficiency levels for this standard. Because we want to emphasize, based on your feedback for the old standards, that when we talk about interaction and conversing with someone and that kind of thing, we mean peers from the target culture, so it could be somebody in another part of the world, and or communities of learners here at home. I know many of you may be in a situation where you may be the only teacher of a particular language in your school or your district, and you may not have access necessarily to communication partners from around the world, but you can capitalize on those communities of learners that you have nearby. If you're a teacher like me, I was a French teacher at a very small high school, but I taught all levels of French. So my communities of learners was every single French class I had, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Some of you said you teach multiple levels. Your students can be communication partners for each other. Likewise, you may have teachers across your district at other schools, or even nearby districts or communities that use the language you were teaching or supervising. And so that communities of learners could be any number of people who use that same language that your students are studying, just at a different level from them, to engage in that conversation. And you can also use, of course, that classroom yourself as peers, particularly in our lower levels. We want our students to practice language and to do interpersonal communication with each other in the classroom. All right, I'll stop for a moment and see if there are any questions about that before we go on. All right. Not seeing any questions. So we've taken a close look at our standards. And now I'm going to share with you the necessitable, actual, can-do statements. We have had necessitable, actual, can-do statements nationally for a number of years now. Their purpose is to guide us as language educators, helping our learners set goals and chart progress, helping us as educators write learning targets for our local curriculum, our thematic units, and our lesson plans as we put that together for our classes, and guiding stakeholders to clarify how well learners communicate. And so really educating everyone about what we mean by different proficiency levels and different skill areas and how those look at different proficiency levels. The necessitable, actual, can-do statements are organized in a particular way. And don't forget, this is our 2026 version. And so this is a brand new screenshot of how these are organized. So we have proficiency benchmarks, performance indicators, examples, and then the intercultural reflection tool. Proficiency benchmarks, and there's a quick screenshot, show those overarching features of language and intercultural performance across the actual proficiency continuum. So you can see there on the screen that goes over novice, intermediate, and advanced, and that's one side of the page. And then, of course, superior and distinguished is on the other side. So again, just the levels right there, and very general statements about what students can do with the language. Then the performance indicators, and this is off the poster that's 11 by 17, takes each of those skill areas, in this case interpersonal communication, and shows what it can do across that range, those proficiency levels, those 5 proficiency levels. And then you can see it's broken down for novice, intermediate, and advanced into low, mid, and high with, again, I can statements of what students should know and be able to do with the language at a particular proficiency level and sublevel. Then we have examples, which takes those statements even further and gives you example can-do statements that you might even use in your classroom, let's say with thematic units or lesson plans in your work with students. And finally, kind of brand new, if you will, is the intercultural reflection tool. And this goes with our necessitable, actual, can-do statements and gives us some examples of reflective activities so that students deepen their understanding of being interculturally, communicatively competent. How are they using their language so that they show their competence, globally speaking? Like I said, those are brand new. Those just went live on the actual website yesterday afternoon. And so you are seeing them for the first time. Those necessitable, actual, can-do statements are posted. There are actually a number of resources posted. The screenshots I took are from these 4 items you see here. There's a PDF of the proficiency benchmarks and performance indicators on an 11 by 17 poster. And that's what I was showing you some screenshots from. And then there's a PDF for novice, a PDF for intermediate, and a PDF for advanced. And showing, again, the benchmarks, the performance indicators, and those examples that are more detailed. All of these are available for free on the actual website. I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat as well so that you can get to it as you need to. All right. We have even more tools, by the way, for our interpersonal communication, or standard number 2. And the next area we're going to look at in our World Language Standards Instructional Toolkit Resources category is our LIS area, Literacy Instruction Standards. I think you're aware the LIS area has a number of things for us, including our World Languages, or LIS Defined for World Languages document that we have looked at before. But our English language arts colleagues also have other resources that we can tap into, because when we talk about literacy and other kinds of things with literacy and language, it really doesn't matter which language you do those things in, because students are learning. And so you see here the academic discourse playbook. It is actually guidance for defining and supporting spoken and written discourse in any K-12 classroom in any language. And so this is an opportunity for us to take a tool that was originally designed by our ELA colleagues and use that particularly to think about the ILC strand, interdisciplinary and literacy connection strand, in standard number 2 as well as standard number 3, presentational communication. In the academic discourse playbook, there are supportive strategies, or what they call plays, because it's a playbook, and then resources for recommendation 1, which is discussion for comprehension, recommendation 2, which is writing for comprehension, and recommendation 3, which is for informal presentations. For us, when we think about standard number 2, interpersonal communication, I'm going to focus this in on recommendation 1, discussion for comprehension, particularly discussion in the classroom that is interpersonal communication and how that looks. In the academic discourse playbook, recommendation 1 has 9 different plays to use, like I said, for standard number 2, particularly in the ILC strand. And here you see the 9 listed. Some of them are probably very familiar to you. I'm guessing you've probably done Think, Pair, Share before, or maybe Socratic seminars or concentric circles. But there's an overview of this particular strategy or play in the academic discourse playbook, and then it's broken down how you would set that up. And they even have templates and things like that that we as teachers could easily create and make them so that they are in whatever target language we're teaching in world languages. So I recommend that to you as another resource, another tool for us to implement our state standards. All right, well, we've talked a lot. I've talked a lot, so I'm going to stop and let you have a turn. I call this Take a Shortcut. I have a picture there about sort of taking a shortcut through the woods, but I call it Take a Shortcut because February is the shortest month of the year. So in the poll, I'm going to ask you, which one of these resources are you going to take with you to study more during the shortest month of the year? So we just went over a lot of them. Which one do you want to take for yourself today and study more to see how you could use that to inform your classroom work? I'm going to go ahead and set up our poll. So go ahead and let us know in the poll, which one of these resources are you going to take with you from today to study during February? Is it our proficiency outcomes document? Is it the successful actual can-do statements poster, or maybe one of the particular sets of documents for novice, intermediate, or advanced that you want to study? Or is it that academic discourse playbook and recommendation number 1 and those different plays or strategies for discussion in the classroom? Take a moment and share which one you would take. All right, got a lot of votes in. Looks like the successful actual can-do statements 11 by 17 poster is very popular. That is a great one, and it has been updated. If you go and pull one of the poster document down, the PDF from the website, you will see that it has our different standards, i.e. the different modes of communication, of course, laid out, and you could download those posters, you could print them out, you could laminate them, put them up in your classroom, that kind of thing, or copy and paste them, if you will, into different kinds of things you need for your proficiency outcomes. I also see that the other items are quite popular as well. Our proficiency outcomes documents itself, and then the successful actual can-do statements that have the examples and more detailed information, as well as the academic discourse playbook. Great. All right. So for our waterfall in the chat, I want you to do some thinking, and like before, type your answer out, but don't hit send until we ask. I want you to say, why did you choose that resource for your shortcut? Why did you pick that one that you indicated on the poll? And you can begin your response with the resource's letter from the poll or the name. Go ahead and type your answer to that question. Why did you choose that resource for your shortcut for studying further? I'll give you a moment to do that, and then we'll move on. Wait just a minute. I haven't said the magic words yet. All right, let's watch the waterfall. Why did you choose that resource for your particular shortcut? All right, a lot of information coming up. Take a look. We've got people saying they want to look at those can-do statements, particularly the poster, more closely because they want to see how it differs from what we've used in the past. You should definitely take a look at that. There weren't a lot of big changes for us, and we kind of knew about these changes that were happening with the 2026 and successful actual can-do statements when we wrote the standards. But they are certainly laid out differently, and I think it's easy to see how proficiency is working across there because the formatting is very helpful in understanding. We also have people choosing particular levels of the can-do statements because they use that in their classroom or want to see what's happening. Some people just want to choose a document because they just want to become more familiar with it. Some people chose the academic discourse playbook as a way to spur conversation and discussion. And that's important. Like we said, with things like the academic discourse playbook or the literacy instruction standards, when we talk about language learning classroom, it doesn't matter which language we're talking about. When we talk about literacy or language education, we can use all of the things that the ELA teams and ELA colleagues have put together for us to reinforce that language learning in the classroom of our target language. All right, we have some people wanting to post the can-do statements so that they can show what they're achieving in the classroom as a teacher and also what their students, are able to see and what they can do. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Wonderful. Let's go ahead and move forward with our broadcast today and our learning about the interpersonal communication. Our next category is our unpacking documents area. And I know some of you have looked at this before, but I like to spend some time here and really look at what's available because I think it's important that we know what's there for us as teachers. In the unpacking documents area, there are 3 world languages unpacking documents, and those documents include what you see here. They include the standard and objective as we go down through the proficiency levels. They have the glossary terms already pulled, so whatever standard and objective you're looking at, the glossary terms for them have already been pulled so that we can see that. So for example, you see now that the one that's for standard number 2, and because we're talking about interpersonal communication, negotiating meaning, obviously the negotiating meaning definition has already been pulled for us there into the unpacking document. There's also, following that, clarifications, which is a restatement of the objective, so what it means in other words. And then there's an in the classroom idea for every single objective in our standard course of study for world languages, meaning there's a classroom example written by an actual experienced classroom teacher, world language teacher, about how that particular objective might look in the classroom. And many times in the classroom ideas are things that you're probably already doing or have done, but they can be great reminders to do that again, especially if you're wanting to really focus in on a particular objective and proficiency level. They can be an inspiration, something maybe you look at and you say, well, I wouldn't do exactly that, but maybe I would adapt that a little bit or change it up. And don't forget, even though we have one for every objective that in a classroom idea, it doesn't have to stay with that. You might want to adapt it so that you could use it for a different proficiency level that you're targeting. Regardless of how you use the in the classroom ideas, keep in mind that they are always just examples. You're not expected to use them if you don't want to use them. They are not a curriculum on their own. They are just examples for you to think about and better understand the objectives and the standards in our standard course of study for the proficiency outcomes that you're working with students on. The unpacking documents area has all 3 documents, like I said. So unpacking for novice, and that has novice low, mid, and high. Unpacking for intermediate with low, mid, and high. And unpacking for advanced with low, mid, and high. And of course, QR codes for all of those. I'm going to put those in the chat, and I want you to go ahead and at least open one. Maybe it's the one that you would use most often given your proficiency outcomes. Maybe it's one you haven't looked at yet and you're just kind of curious what's there. But take a look at those. Pull those up on your screen or your device that you're working on and see what's there. Some of you may even have these already downloaded, and so you may want to reference them there. Okay. I'll give you a moment to open one up and kind of take a look to see that structure that we just looked at with the objectives, the glossary information, the clarifications, and the in-classroom ideas. One thing I will also tell you is that when it comes to the unpacking documents, and like I said, how they're set up with the standards and objectives, the glossary terms, the clarifications, and in the classroom, the way we're displaying them currently by proficiency level is only one way to do it. And later this school year, we're actually going to release a new version of the unpacking documents, tentatively called standards progressions, that will actually have an unpacking document for every standard. And so instead of going across proficiency levels, there'll be a packing document for standard 1 with all of the objectives and the information you see here for that standard. There'll be one for standard 2, our interpersonal communication that we're focusing on today. And then of course there'll be one for standard 3. Just a different way to kind of look at the unpacking and just think about our standards and the objectives and the kinds of things that we think about for our classroom when we're writing our local curriculum. So those will be out later this school year. All right, well, let's take a closer look because I think it's really important for us to think about the materials we have and what we want to do with them. So in this next part, it's called In the Classroom, kind of your turn with this information. And obviously, we're going to focus on interpersonal communication. I have selected 5 of the objectives from standard number 2 for us to focus on. The first one's from novice low in the ICC strand, and then novice mid in the ILC strand, novice high in the ICC strand, intermediate low in the ILC strand, and intermediate mid in the ICC strand. So clearly you can see a pattern, because one of the things to think about with our objectives, and particularly when we're thinking about any communication mode, in this case interpersonal communication, is how do the standards align vertically and horizontally? How do they look as you go from proficiency level to proficiency level or strand to strand? And there is, in fact, a slow building of skills, as we know with proficiency, as you go from novice mid to advanced high, but also as you go through the different strands. So I've chosen 5 to pull from. And I want to remind you, as we're thinking about this, about performance versus proficiency. Performance is the practice we do in the classroom with our students so they build proficiency, and the proficiency is what they have in that language when they leave us and are out in the real world using the language in so many different ways. So as we go through these next slides, what I want you to do is to choose one of these objectives that we're going to talk about. You see that there are 5. You may want to choose the objective for the particular course you said at the beginning you're going to focus on for standard number 2. You may want to choose one of these objectives based on the in the classroom idea. Maybe you particularly like that in the classroom idea, or it's something similar to what you do already and you want to think about it. But you're going to pick one from what we're going to show in the next several slides. So be ready to share which of these objectives you're going to choose for this activity. These are all, of course, standard number 2, but I always set up our slides so that you could take them and reuse them locally. So for interpersonal communication, the novice low objective from the ICC strand is engage with peers from the target cultures and or communities of learners by using practiced and memorized words and or phrases in familiar contexts. The in the classroom idea from our unpacking novice level document is this. So teachers arrange for class partnership. Remember, we said class partnerships can be somewhere around the world, those peers from the target cultures, or communities of learners much closer to home. But the teacher arranges for classroom partnership and provides a short list of interview questions in the target language the students can use with a peer. Here's the examples that you see. If you've ever taught a beginning level course, you probably recognize these are the kinds of questions your earliest learners can work with. And so then students draw the names of other students that they can interview, maybe at recess, during lunch, after school, via phone or virtual meeting, if there's partners are some distance away, depending on what you've arranged. And then they make notes about what they learned during their conversation. That's the in the classroom idea for NL.ICC.2.2. All right. Moving on now. For the novice mid ILC objective we've chosen, it says request and provide information by asking and answering a few simple questions on very familiar and everyday topics, using practice or memorized words, phrases, and simple sentences. So again, think about when you look at that objective, learner interaction, communication task, all of those things that we're looking for. This one, again, obviously is from our in the classroom idea from our novice level unpacking. And I'm not going to read it to you, but I want you to pause for a moment and read this particular in the classroom example for novice mid. Notice that in the classroom example, obviously we're in the target language, but also the teacher is reinforcing at the end, asking students to share the answers they've received by using complete sentences in the target language. And again, we want to push our students to use, as it says in the objective, memorize words, phrases, and simple sentences. All right. Next up is our novice high objective. Again, from the ICC strand now. ICC strand, so switching back. Engage with peers from the target cultures and our communities of learners by using simple sentences and questions in familiar contexts. So again, from our novice unpacking, take a moment, read through this particular in the classroom idea to see if you want to choose it. All right. We want to make sure we have time for the activity. So we're going to go ahead and roll forward and take a look at the last two objectives that are chosen. Our intermediate low focuses on request and provide information by asking and answering with practice and some original questions all familiar and everyday topics by creating simple sentences and follow-up questions. So this is an in the classroom idea from our intermediate level unpacking. Take a moment. This one is interesting because it looks at students selecting or assigning a secret identity, either someone in the school or outside of the school. And I'll go ahead and let you read that one and see if you like it. All right. And then finally, our last option from intermediate mid ICC, engage actively with peers from the target culture and our communities of learners by participating in conversations on familiar topics. This in the classroom idea Depends on the teacher providing a prompt in the target language and then students working in pairs. Take a look, read through this one to see if you want to choose it. And remember, the in the classroom idea are just examples, things that you could do, things that you maybe have done to get your students talking or signing. All right, so we've come to your turn. I asked you to pick one of those 5 based on in the classroom idea or the objective that you wanted. And so what I want you to do is first answer the poll question. Which objective did you choose for this activity? And I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Go ahead and tell us which objective you chose. Was it novice low, novice mid, novice high, intermediate low, or intermediate mid? Go ahead and click on the one you decided to choose. All right, looks like about half of you have put your vote in for what you chose. Don't be shy. You can just pick one at random if you're not sure. Maybe you liked a couple of them, or maybe you need time to just review them. Don't worry, in our activity, you'll have those in the classroom ideas and the objectives on the screen so you can work with them directly. Looks like certainly our novice level objectives are a little more popular right now, which makes sense. Many of us teach or supervise beginning levels of language instruction, at level 1, 2, as you're just starting out in high school credit courses or even in elementary courses. All right. All right, well, go ahead and put your vote in if you haven't. But what we're going to do for the Your Turn Classroom Connection is we're going to go to a Google Doc that I've created for us called Building Proficiency in Interpersonal Communication. And then we're going to review the in the classroom idea for your objective that you chose. And then you're going to get to add notes to that document about how you would adapt, change, or implement this idea from the in the classroom idea for one language course you teach or supervise. You only have to pick one. So I'm going to go ahead and click out to the Building Proficiency in Interpersonal Communication document and show you what that looks like. Just a moment to pull it up. Now we'll take it onto our screen here. All right. Here's our Building Proficiency in Interpersonal Communication document. And what I want you to do is review, like I said, the classroom idea for the objective you chose using table of contents. So you can go over here to the left, you can go novice low, novice mid, high, or intermediate low, or intermediate mid, and go right down to it. And then what I want you to do is add notes about how you would either adapt, change, or implement that particular idea for one language course you teach or supervise. So notice here's novice low, that was popular with a lot of you. Here's the objective itself, stated again, the in the classroom idea, so you can see it right from the slide. And then, like I said, you choose, are you going to adapt that, change it in some way, maybe to a different proficiency level or something like that, or implement it specifically in your classroom? Maybe you already do. But I did do one example for you up here. I chose the novice mid objective from ILC strand. And I said I would implement it because I actually was a French 1 teacher, like I said, for many years. Taught French 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I like this particular in the classroom idea. And I kind of did something very similar. So I just said I would implement that. And notice I've said, you know, I would distribute those information exchange sheets like it said, and I would ask students to write 7 questions. So I'm getting very specific about how I would implement it in my classroom, much more specific than the in the classroom idea was in the unpacking originally. And then I wrote out what I would have them do, what kinds of questions they would get, and then what they would do and how much time I would give them to do that. So that's what I want you to do. And I see someone asking the document link. I'm so glad you did. I'm actually going to put that document link in the chat so we can all go over to this, because what I want to do is give you time to do this. And I'm so pleased we've got quite a bit of time. Go ahead and take a look. I have put that in the chat, and this is a Google Doc that we're building together. So we will keep this as a, you know, an artifact of our work together. And I'm going ahead and also putting the full link. You should have full editing rights. I see people jumping on right now. But I'm going to put the direct link as well in case that embedded link is not the easiest to access. That will also be in the chat here. It's just a Google Doc that we're building together. All right. Well, we have plenty of time. It says 4:41. I'm going to give you at least 10 minutes to work on this, and we'll see how we're doing then. Go ahead, like I said, jump onto that document using the link in the chat, and then go down to the objective you want to either adapt, change, or implement, and write your example. And be real specific. Tell which language and level of course you teach, or if you teach, you know, elementary or a DLI class or something like that. Be very specific about how you, as an experienced teacher, are using this in the classroom idea to make it useful. And I will go on mute here. I am still here if you need anything, but I'm going to monitor our tech behind the scenes. All right. Well, thank you so much for participating in this. Looks like we have a lot of great ideas being shared of ways to adapt, change, and implement this. Let's go ahead and just kind of scroll through this document and give a shout out to all the hard work that's happening. This first one for Novice Low was, you know, that short list of interview questions and that kind of thing. See a lot of you who are adapting it. Some people say they're going to use this first thing in the morning as a warm-up. Great. And get your students talking and working with each other. Or maybe having students prepare questions and answer, and then interview each other in dyads. Maybe they can negotiate meaning, ask for clarifying questions, and then help each other as they do a gallery walk. Another person said they, after completing an interview, they would present about the person they interviewed in the class to share the information they learned. And this is an important thing to point out. Even though we're talking about standard number 2 interpersonal communication, we don't teach things in isolation, right? And so when you think about doing something like this, but then saying now they're going to give a presentation to the class, now you moved into presentational communication as well. So you're tapping into another objective, another skill area that you want your students to develop and practice. And so that's always a good thing when you get that overlap, if you will. Another person who said they do inside-outside circles. So this is to help them focus on class questions, 1 or 2 questions, do a mini conversation. And then somebody said they would provide sentence frames, color-coded questions and answers, and a word bank to support those low proficiency learners. And that's, you know, that kind of scaffolding that they're talking about with sentence frames and color-coded questions and answers is always helpful, particularly at the lower proficiency levels where you're talking about novice low or just a novice range of proficiency. The next person said they're not sure how viable a class partnership would be with online interactions. So, you know, you can define what a class partnership is that will work for your students and for the way you need to supervise them. That's perfectly fine. Somebody said they would use this activity by using speed interviews or video exchanges to increase participation and repetition. Because one thing this does lend itself to, especially when thinking about a class partnership and monitoring, is recording. Almost every student has some kind of device. Some of our schools have, you know, one-to-one setups, or other ways, in fact, that you can interact with folks and that can be captured. Another person said there, do something like what is described in the classroom idea, but it is set in a restaurant as a restaurant skit. Okay, great. And then they record a video with their partners practicing the interview. Great. Next person said they would, they're not sure that they would talk about foods or whatnot, but obviously you could change up the questions the way you need to. All right. For novice mid, we've got some folks with the information exchange sheet saying they would use this activity as designed the first time. That's a good way to think about it. And then after students learn the vocabulary, have them come up with their own questions. So maybe an extension of what they've done, building on the skills that they've got. They can definitely add more vocabulary. I see someone mentioned using this as like a speed dating opportunity. So giving students multiple opportunities to speak. And then maybe, like it says here, reproducing a short dialogue, perhaps videotape themselves. And again, that kind of overlaps then with presentational communication standard number 3. So that's good. For novice high, we have the collection of small items and whatnot. And so we have people saying they give students an image and students would discuss that with full sentences. And that's always a great thing to do. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, obviously, but there's all kinds of images we could use, whether it's pictures or reproductions of art or, memes or that kind of thing. There's all kinds of images we could pull into our classrooms for students to use. Another person said they do this with the daily routine, have items be like hygiene products or things that they use to get ready, clues about what they should focus on. Another person said they would use it to engage with peers of the target culture, so making like a video call to a peer school where you could do basic interactions. Another said they'd use this to practice vocabulary related to sensory details. That's a good idea because you're getting students to look at and they can also do, touch it, feel it, smell it, if it makes a sound, that kind of thing. That's great. Then we have folks saying that they would restructure this and have students ask questions and narrow down what the item is. And they have some example questions. One person says that this comes to mind, the idea of playing Guess Who and doing that activity as a learning activity. And then for implementing, they said they would implement it because it requires the use of images or items from the target culture. So it's a good cultural element to the activity. And maybe they ask students to do their own questions and have some interaction that way. And I see someone mentions having physical reality for this, like you might have to have that or get just pictures of it or images. Finally, with the intermediate low example, this is the one about the secret identity. We've just got a couple here, a couple of folks who focused on that. One said they would like to use this, but the characters would be from a play they're currently reading. That's a nice way to pull in something students are familiar with, but to think about it in a new way. And then they would do this after having practiced describing the characters in writing, and again, getting in some presentational communication or standard number 3 there. And then someone said they would do this with a level 4 independent study student using characters from a French television show that they'd watched or studied. Okay. And then finally, for our novice mid, we have, intermediate mid one, we have someone who said they would adapt it for Japanese 4 and have students write a paragraph explaining why it'd be fun to be their favorite animal and share what they could do using a particular verb. And then some description of how they might do that. So again, great examples of how this would work, how you would adapt it, change it, implement it, use it as an inspiration. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that and for taking the time to jot down your classroom connection. Like I said, we will make sure that these become part of the materials we have, sort of the artifacts of this broadcast, so that we can continue to use not only the in the classroom ideas originally from the unpacking, but your extensions of them from this webinar. All right, I'm conscious of our time. I do want to get us wrapped up on time today. So with that, we have our evaluation. I always like to ask for folks to fill out an evaluation. Tell me what you liked and didn't like. Tell me what else you might need for understanding our standards, because I'm always looking for ideas like that. I will go ahead and grab the link to the evaluation. You can see it there, of course, on the screen. But this is the evaluation we use for the entire webinar series. So you get to indicate that we're in the Interpersonal communication presentation by date. It's on February 11th. So just go ahead and click on that link. Go to ncdpi.gov/eval-WL webinars. One thing I will promise you is that this is an anonymous evaluation, so you can say whatever you need to and tell me whatever you need to as far as questions and whatnot. I am also going to take your email addresses from when you registered and make sure that you are on the listserv. I will make sure that you get updates and things like that. And I want to assure you that the evaluation is anonymous, but again, I'm collecting your email addresses from your attendance today, and you do earn a certificate of attendance. So within 7 to 10 days, I will process and post our webinar archives like I've been promising you, and then submit that request for certificates of attendance if you participated today and are eligible for a certificate. And then in about 3 to 6 weeks, you'll receive an email with your certificate of attendance attached. So that's our process, and that's how quickly we can get things out. I'm pausing for the moment. Please go ahead and fill out the evaluation. But if you have any questions, we can certainly tackle those as well. Also, don't forget, if you ever want to chat about anything, particularly related to our state standards or any policies about world languages, I am always happy to connect with you. You see on the screen there, again, my contact information. And you can actually also set up a one-to-one meeting, sort of office hours, if you will, but office hours that will work for both you and I to chat about whatever you need to related to the standards or the state policy work around world languages. I'm happy to talk. With that in the chat, yeah. Well, I do see a question. Yes, there will be a recording. We've been making a recording this whole time. I did pause it when we were working on our activity with building the interpersonal examples, but I will post this recording and the slide set as well as all of the links you saw in the standards implementation area of the World Languages Resources Hub under professional learning. I'll do that in about 7 to 10 days. Sometimes it takes a while for the video to process and so forth, but I want to make sure I get that posted. But it will be there. And then I will also submit the request for certificates of attendance for those who qualified. And then you should get your certificate of attendance in about 3 to 6 weeks. It comes in an email with your certificate attached. Please know that you are also always welcome to use the materials posted from this broadcast. So again, the recording, the slides, all of the links and activities and so forth. You can use those locally if you're doing local professional learning on our state standards or about interpersonal communication in general or any of our resources. I post these as Google Slides, so you can just make your own copy. You do not have to recreate slides. That's very time consuming, and I want to save you that time. Also, if you know someone who wasn't able to participate today but would still like to, I also posted an asynchronous version of this broadcast. And that allows someone to listen to the recording, go through the activities and so forth, and get credit if they want for participating today from today's work. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause our recording. But I'm still here to answer questions. We still have some time together. I do thank you for joining us today and for sharing all of the information that we did. Oh, and I see someone asking about the badge. Thank you for reminding me. In this Power Proficiency series this year, we are offering a badge. If you attend or complete 3 out of the 4 webinar broadcasts, you get your Power Proficiency badge at the end of the school year. And so you can look for that. I do keep track as we go through and give certificates of attendance, either for live broadcasts or for the asynchronous option. You can do either one or a combination thereof if you want to get credit for all of the webinars and earn the badge. I see someone asking when and where will the asynchronous version be available? When is in 7 to 10 days. Just like with processing and posting the webinar archives, I set up the asynchronous version in 7 to 10 days. So it is February 11th. So by February 21st, it will certainly be posted. I put it in our World Languages Resources Hub under Standard Implementation and Professional Development. That's where it's always at. And like I said, I will add your email addresses from the registration list to our listserv, so you will get our regular newsletters that has information about where things are posted and when they get posted and are available for you to work with or to share with your colleagues as well.